We've got massive news coming from Ubisoft, a company previously thought to have been on the rise that's just had a pretty darn stark dip in its stock following a rough month. In a press release, they updated their financial targets for fiscal year 1920 and, they've delayed major titles and they've reworked their initial financial targets for fiscal year 2021. It's pretty serious. So earlier this year, around May, they were riding high at about €83 per share, but by now, that's almost halved. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another industry report. Of course, be sure to like, sub, and ring that bell to let the algorithm know that you enjoy our content. Okay, let's get into it. October's Ghost Recon Breakpoint was met with poor reviews and a wave of backlash to its business model. Now, this title took Ubisoft from their around €70 per share down to about €56 per share. That's a pretty darn massive 20% decrease in value. But, well, when today's markets opened and stabilized, they were trading at about €44.80. That is their lowest valuation since April 2017. Pretty darn insane. Why? Well, their short-term outlook is not great, but what's more interesting is their reasoning and the surprisingly frank statement released by their CEO. So they revised their fiscal year 2019 to 2020 net bookings projection downwards to €1,450 million and an operating income of between €20 million and €50 million. Now, those numbers have to be taken in context here because their previous projection was $2,185 million in net bookings and an operating income of around €480 million. So yeah, their projected net bookings are down like 30%, maybe a bit more, and that's wiping out the vast majority of their expected operating income. That's pretty darn insane. So you might be wondering, well, what happened to all the money that they anticipated earning? It's pretty darn simple. Ghost Recon Breakpoint, and they note to a lesser extent, The Division 2. Then on top of that, they've also decided to delay Gods and Monsters, Rainbow Six Quarantine, and Watch Dogs Legion into the next fiscal year, with them actually expecting a pretty darn strong fiscal year 2020 to 2021 lineup. Now, I'll get to the reasoning in a little bit, but because of these changes, they expect a strong fiscal year 2020 to 2021, releasing 5 AAA games, and therefore targeting net bookings of €2,600 million and an operating income of €600 million. So that's pretty darn strong targets. Now, what's a lot more interesting here is that, of course, Yves, their co-founder and CEO, actually did a bit of a letter along with this. And he opened this by saying that they've done well over the last few years, building a diversified portfolio and successfully going digital. And given their performance from 2017 to now, that absolutely is a fair statement. Now, he also called out the particularly outstanding momentum of Rainbow Six Siege and Assassin's Creed Odyssey. But then he goes on to note their failings in detail. So, he says that Ghost Recon Breakpoint's quality appeared to be on track based on playtests, but that critical reception and sales during its first weeks were very disappointing. He said that they will continue to support the game, and he notes 3 reasons why they think that it and The Division 2 underperformed. Okay, so their first reason is they think it's harder to generate interest for sequels to live multiplayer games after the prior game will have been benefiting from years of optimizations. He says that they therefore need to actually just make sure that there is more time between each iteration of their live games. And I think this is actually a very fair statement. I think Destiny 2 players are certainly going to feel what you've said here, right? Because Destiny 1 had a big problem at launch, but it then benefited from loads of improvements over its life. And then Destiny 2 at launch basically undid most of that. As for The Division 2, well, I think that happened to a lesser degree than with Destiny. It was a well-received game, especially for those who bounced off the original. But for the people who played Division 1 up to patch 1.8, it wasn't really a great leap forward, was it? Especially because Division 2 would have lacked some of the gameplay features that came with the Division 1's DLC, so that's a pretty fair point. Now, secondly, you've said that their strategy of introducing gameplay innovations has a positive effect, but that in order to win players over, they need to be perfectly implemented in order to offer an optimal experience. So, Yves, mate, you might want to turn the robot speak down there a little bit. He said, though, that the change in formula with Breakpoint has basically been enjoyed by some people, with average playtime increasing, but that it was, quote, strongly rejected by a significant portion of the community. And you know what? I think admitting that your new innovation was strongly rejected by a significant portion of your community is a pretty ballsy statement. Now, you know what? I've been covering World of Warcraft for years on my other channel, and I wish its developers were, just generally a bit less thick and just had the stones to say something like that. Now, there's a lot to break down here. So the new gameplay innovation for Breakpoint was what? Random drop loot game inspired RPGification of the Ghost Recon series, along with the enemies having levels and bullet sponge drones. Eves, my friend, no one asked for that. It goes against the core essence of that franchise. Sure, average playtime might have increased, but that's probably because the game now only appeals to a very specific type of player who love those drops. So sure, your average playtime might have increased, but I think your player counts are tiny in comparison to the predecessor, and they pretty much said that. The gameplay innovations here, they were clearly added to make more money, right? They offered an RPG loot system and then a bunch of boosts and ways to even turn the premium currency into in-game free currency to buy things with. Now, this was rejected by the community because it was transparently a bastardization of the game's core and clearly one in the name of monetization. Then finally, he said the Breakpoint did not have enough differentiation factors, and that prevented its intrinsic qualities from standing out. Right. I think that is true, but I don't think it's true for the reasons that he thinks it's true. It lacked differentiation factors because they literally made it more similar to The Division 2. Like, their new gameplay innovations literally made it more like other titles in their lineup. Ghost Recon has a fairly specific fantasy. Rolling around in Bolivia like in Wildlands, that's in keeping with that. Fighting drones that are bullet sponges and soldiers with Division-like levels getting random loot, that's not, in terms of gameplay or setting, what Ghost Recon is. Now yes, Future Soldier and Advanced Warfighter, they took the franchise to new places, but neither of them were loot-based games in the way that Breakpoint is. The core here is that Ubisoft murdered the essence of that game in the chase for more live service dollars. So, how are they actually dealing with all this? Well, this is where Yves says that they are implementing significant changes to their production process and that they're going to learn and evolve. This has led to them postponing Rainbow Six Quarantine, Watch Dogs Legion, and Ghosts and Monsters until the 2020-2021 fiscal year. So that's after April 2020 and before the start of April 2021. He said that these games do have strong identities, but they want their development teams to just have more time to ensure that their respective innovations are perfectly implemented so as to deliver the optimal experience for players. Once again, Yves coming in with robot language. He says, though, that this decision will have a very significant impact on their financial results and that it actually does go against their recent development successes, but that it is in line with their strategy to maximize the future value of their brands and the long-term benefit of their employees, players, and shareholders. Yves ends by saying that they are basically poised to benefit from the industry's strong expansion, its constant evolution, and he mentions, of course, name the three things he's going to mention: mobile, stronger growth in Asia, and esports. But okay, to actually break into the analysis here, I've got a few issues with his reasoning, as I've made clear, but I think he broadly makes sense here. If the plan was to have Breakpoint be an evil cash machine, then they certainly were blunt with it to the point where it obviously turned off players. Now, I've got to wonder if a similar system was due to be implemented into Watch Dogs Legion, and if actually pulling that out is part of the reason why that game has been delayed. Now, them talking about diversification between their franchises, that is a good thing. Ubisoft's open worlds, I don't really play them that much because they're just so cookie cutter by this point, and they clearly brought Breakpoint far too close to The Division. Him talking about live service game follow-ups, though, I think that is quite interesting and quite welcome, especially, I come from an MMO background, okay? Our World of Warcraft channel is the largest thing that we do here. Now, that, playing that game, you get the expansions. There's no WoW 2 that completely resets all your progress, all your characters, and all the game mechanics. It therefore has felt a little bit odd to me how non-MMO live service games that pretty much try to operate in the MMO business model pretty much throw out their successes every 3 years, and they do a reset game that essentially is just in a worse state than the final update of the past game. I really think that's something the industry learned with Destiny 2, and certainly Bungie seem to have a 5-year plan for Destiny 2 now, so it seems to make sense. Anyway, games like The Division 2 and Siege, they look great and they play great, so hopefully this is Ubisoft realizing that their best plan should just be to develop those games for years and just, keep that audience healthy. Now, there is one thing that I do think is typical of Ubisoft, right? They release sequels with insane financial expectations. So Watch Dogs 1 benefited from years of hype and being seen as a jump forward into the next generation of hardware. A big, new type of open world game with more interaction, beautiful graphics, and, most of that actually did turn out to be a lie, but you can see why it sold so well based on that hype. It basically became culturally relevant within gaming. Take Wildlands, same thing, the franchise was a bit sleepy for a while, and that blew people away with its initial reveal. It seemed like something new and fresh. Take The Division 1, again, years of pre-release hype, big tech demos of the new engine, and a gameplay loop that was novel at the time. Now, if you take Breakpoint, Division 2, and Watch Dogs 2, those are all sequels to those games that just did not have cultural relevance. They were not seen as breaking new ground, so people just didn't care as much. This is pretty much a constant with Ubisoft. Wildlands and Division 1 sold extremely well, but to expect their sequels to do the same, that would necessitate severely misreading why the originals sold so well. That's why I think they're being smart with Watch Dogs Legion, though. They're entirely focusing on what makes it new, and they've decided not to call it Watch Dogs 3. Legion has captured a bit of that, I would say, cultural level hype within gaming that pushed the original to its strong sales. And of course a big post-launch wave of letdown. Then finally, one thing that I would like to commend them on though, because I think it's important to be fair here, is that they are taking a large financial hit now because they know it is the best long-term financial move. It's still a financially motivated decision, but I think it is good to see, and it's something we don't see enough. Imagine if EA decided to delay Anthem into fiscal year 2019-2020, maybe giving the dev team 6 more months. That would have been good. So ultimately, I do believe Ubisoft when they say that these delays will lead to their future games being better, and I'm glad that they've got the balls to basically eat the short-term decimation of their market value. That is a pretty good thing. We need to see more of it. But still, while that is good, we can't forget what they tried to do with Breakpoint and how they're likely going to try to do that again. Ubisoft have led the games as a service charge. They've stuffed Assassin's Creed full of microtransactions for years, particularly with Odyssey. So yes, I will commend them for delaying their lineup. I think making money via quality games is best for them and also best for the consumer. But there is a lot that we need to keep an eye on. Now, the final interesting thing is their market value, because at this stage, given the strength of their 2020 lineup and just overall, I think, just thinking about the health of the company, I've got to say, it seems like 45 euros is undervalued for them, and I've got to wonder if Ubisoft would be a good long-term hold stock. Hard to tell. I think this is maybe something to revisit in a year when we can actually see how that stock performs following the release of at least some of that fiscal year's lineup. Anyway, that's it for this video. Be sure to stay on the channel though, because there will be another one up today and a very busy weekend on this channel. So, sub and all that good stuff. And with that, thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.